Hello Year 6 and welcome back to our reading of Stormbreaker. I'm here with chapter 11 today. So, chapter 11, Doesmarie Mine. Alex walked through Port Allen, past the Fisherman's Arms pub and up the cobbled street towards the library. It was the middle of the afternoon, but the village seemed to be asleep. The boats bobbing in the harbour, the streets and pavements empty. A few seagulls wheeled lazily over the rooftops, uttering the usual mournful cries. The air smelled of salt and dead fish. The library was red brick, Victorian, sitting self-importantly at the top of a hill. Alex pushed open the heavy swing door and went into a room with a tiled chessboard floor and about 50 shelves fanning out from a central reception area. 6 or 7 people were sitting at tables working. A man in a thickly knitted jersey was reading Fisherman's Week. Alex went over to the reception desk. There was the inevitable sign, "Silence, please." Beneath it, a smiling, round-faced woman sat reading Crime and Punishment. "Can I help you?" Despite the sign, she had such a loud voice that everyone looked up when she spoke. Yes, Alex had come here because of a chance remark made by Herod Sile. He had been talking about Ian Ryder. Spent half his time in the village, in the port, the post office, the library. Alex had already seen the post office, another old-fashioned building near the port. He didn't think he'd learn anything here. But the library, maybe Ryder had come here looking for information. Maybe the librarian would remember him. "I had a friend staying in the village," Alex said. "I was wondering if he came here. His name's Ian Ryder." "Ryder with an I or a Y? I don't think we have had any Ryders at all." The woman tapped a few keys on her computer and then shook her head. "No." "He was staying at Sile Enterprises," Alex said. "He was about 40, thin, fair hair. He drove a BMW. "Oh yes," the librarian smiled. "He did come here a couple of times. A nice man, very polite. I knew he didn't come from around here. He was looking for a book." "Do you remember which book?" "Of course I do. I can't remember faces, but I never forget a book. He was interested in viruses." "Viruses?" "Yes, that's what I said. He wanted some information." "A computer virus. This might change everything." A computer virus was the perfect act of sabotage, invisible and instantaneous. A single blip written into the software and every single piece of information in the Stormbreaker software could be destroyed at any time. But Herod Sile possibly couldn't want to damage his own creation. That would make no sense at all. So maybe Alex had been wrong about him from the very start. Maybe Sile had no idea what was really going on. "I'm afraid I couldn't help him," the librarian continued. "This is only a small library and our grant's been cut for the 3rd year running." She sighed. "Anyway, he said he'd get some books sent down from London. He told me he had a box at the post office." That made sense too. Ian Ryder wouldn't have wanted information sent to Sile Enterprises where it could be intercepted. "Was that the last time you saw him?" Alex asked. "No, he came back about a week later. He must have got what he wanted because this time he wasn't looking for books about viruses. He was interested in local affairs." "What sort of local affairs?" "Cornish local history. Shelf CL. She pointed. "He spent an afternoon looking in one of the books and then he left. He hasn't been back since then, which is a shame. I was rather hoping he'd join the library. It would be nice to have a new member." Local history. That wasn't going to help him. Alex thanked the librarian and made for the door. His hand was just reaching out for the handle when he remembered. CL 47519. He reached into his pocket and took out the square of paper he had found in his bedroom. Sure enough, the letters were the same. CL. They weren't showing a grid reference. CL was the label on a book. Alex went over to the shelf the librarian had shown him. Books grow old faster when they're not being read, and the ones gathered here were long past retirement, leaning tiredly against one another for support. CL 47519, the number, was printed on the spine, was called Doesmery, the story of Cornwall's oldest mine. He carried it over to a table, opened it, and quickly skimmed through it, wondering why a history of Cornish tin should have been of interest to Ian Ryder. The story it told was a familiar one. The mine had been owned by the Doesmery family for 11 generations. In the 19th century, there had been 400 mines in Cornwall. By the early 1990s, there were only 3. Doesmery was still one of them. The price of tin had collapsed, and the mine itself was almost exhausted, but there was no other work in the area, and the family had continued running it, even though the mine was quickly exhausting them. In 1991, Sir Rupert Doesmery, the last owner, had quietly slipped away and blown his brains out. He was buried in the local churchyard in a coffin made, it was said, of tin. His children had closed down the mine, selling the land above it to Sile Enterprises. The mine itself was sealed off, with several of the tunnels now underwater. The book contained a number of old black and white photographs, pit ponies and old-fashioned lanterns. Groups of figures standing with axes and lunchboxes. Now all of them would be under the ground themselves. Flicking through the pages, Alex came to a map showing the layout of the tunnels at the time when the mine was closed. It was hard to be sure of the scale, but there was a labyrinth of shafts, tunnels and railway lines running for miles underground. Go down into the utter blackness of the underground and you'd be lost instantly. Had Ian Ryder made his way into Doesmery? If so, what had he found? Alex remembered the corridor at the foot of the metal staircase. Dark brown, unfinished walls and the light bulbs hanging on their wires had reminded him of something, and suddenly he knew what it was. The corridor must be nothing more than one of the tunnels from the old mine. Suppose Ian Ryder had also gone down the staircase. Like Alex, he had been confronted with a locked metal door and had been determined to find his way past it. But he had recognised the corridor for what it was, and that was why he had come back to the library. He had found a book on the Doesmery mine, this book. The map had shown him a way to the other side of the door, and he had made a note of it. Alex took out the diagram that Ian Ryder had drawn and laid it on the page on top of the printed map. Holding the 2 sheets together, he held them up to the light. The lines that Ryder had drawn on the sheet fitted exactly over the shafts and tunnels of the mine, showing the way through. Alex was certain of it. If he could find the entrance to Doesmery, he could follow the map through to the other side of the metal door. 10 minutes later, he left the library with a photocopy of the page. He went down to the harbour and found one of those maritime stores that seemed to sell everything and anything. Here he bought himself a powerful torch, a jersey, a length of rope and a box of chalk. Then he climbed back into the hills. Back on the quad, Alex raced across the cliff tops with the sun already sinking in the west. Ahead of him, he could see the single chimney and crumbling tower that he hoped would mark the entrance to the Kernwick shaft, which took its name from the ancient language of Cornwall. According to the map, this was where he should begin. At least the quad had made his life easier. It would have taken him an hour to reach it on foot. He was running out of time, and he knew it. Already the Stormbreakers would have begun leaving the plant, and in less than 24 hours the Prime Minister would be activating them. If the software really had been infected with some sort of virus, what would happen? Some sort of humiliation for both Sile and the British government? Or worse? And how did a computer bug tie in with what he had seen the night before? Whatever the submarine had been delivering at the jetty, it couldn't be anything to do with computers. The silver boxes with their vacuum seals looked like something out of Star Wars, and you don't shoot a man for dropping a hard drive. Alex parked the quad next to the tower and went in through an arched doorway. At first he thought he must have made some sort of mistake. The building looked more like a ruined church than the entrance to a mine. Other people had been here before him. There were a few crumpled beer cans and old crisp packets on the floor, and the usual graffiti on the walls. JRH was here. Nick loves Cass. Visitors leaving the worst parts of themselves behind in fluorescent paint. His foot came down on something that clanged, and he saw that he was standing on a metal trapdoor set in the concrete floor. Grass and weeds were sprouting round the edges, but putting his hand against the crack, he could feel a draught of air rising from below. This must be the entrance to the shaft. The trapdoor was bolted down with a heavy padlock, several centimetres thick. Alex swore under his breath. He had left the zip cream back in his room. The cream would have eaten through the bolt in seconds, but he didn't have the time to go all the way back to Sile Enterprises to get it. He knelt down and shook the padlock in frustration. To his surprise, it swung open in his hand. Somebody had been here before him. Ian Ryder, it had to be. He must have managed to unlock it and hadn't fully closed it again, so that it would be ready when he came back.